Nikhil, hi, good to have you with us.
Hey, Ashu. Good to have you. Long time.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. I hope you've been safe. Everybody in the family at Bijak, everybody's been safe. COVID hasn't been a detrimental. The way it's been. We've seen it across the country.
Yep, yep. Right now everything is okay. All good. April was the deadliest month we have seen
Right.
in company. So within company, more than 60% of people were
Oh,
infected, or
oh,
maybe their dear ones, like people living
right.
in the same house. So, but luckily we don't have anyone who left us. So all good now.
Wonderful, wonderful, and fingers crossed, right? And that wave three doesn't hurt us all that severely. Uh, Nikhil, I am looking forward to this discussion, right? Given what we're going through as a country, right?
Mm,
The huge wave of digitization, right? The huge wave of or a push that is being brought in at a policy level, right? To change how trade happens in the agricultural ecosystem zone. I think is being trying. The government is kind of trying to sort of redesign it, make
mhm,
it more efficient, make it more transparent, right? And I think they're kind of there's a huge amount of effort which is being put in, right? And I think it's being deliberated across all layers, which makes it a very relevant discussion and which makes it a very important discussion in that sense, right?
correct.
I think with that as the context for our conversation today, what of course it makes it a lot of very very exciting. I think Bijak in any case has been doing some exceptional work, right? You've been funded very quickly, right? You have some of the marquee investors who are backing your journey, right? Who put their faith in you very very early on, and I would love to talk to you more about that as well, right? Um, with that, Nikhil, before we dive into our discussion, right, for the day today, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? You're fairly young, right? You kind of started very early. I think it'll be a nice starting point to know a little about you and your team, and then we move into the BJ story.
Cool, cool, Ashu. So we started Bijak in uh, early 2020s, right? So
Sure.
it was, I would say, it was uh, 20, uh, it was May 2019, I would say, when we first went market live to test our product.
Right.
So before I start with the product, I'll give a quick intro of the team, right? So
Sure.
we are a five founder team, and right now close to 200 member team.
Wow.
Of course, a wonderful team of young, energetic people working day and night,
Right.
24/7, 365 days. All of our young folks, luckily, we call them BJEC family. So
Right.
it was more of this young chaps who brought us here.
Uh
Uh,
huh.
of course. So I'll tell you about the founders. Nukul takes care of overall strategy. So
Right.
he's Darden pass out.
Uh huh.
Before Darden, he was in Pets Pilani, worked across couple of investment banking firm,
Right.
worked with JP Morgan, then went to start his own startup. And he was there with me in Govasco. So Govasco
Hmm.
was one of the agritech startup. Uh, the second founder, Mahesh works across a couple of investment banking firms in India. Uh, then he went to join early Revolt, the electric vehicle arm of
Right.
Micro, and then he joined us. He takes care of finance and strategy.
Hmm.
We have Jitender. Jitender takes care of tech product. He's an IT Delhi dropper. So he dropped
Right.
off IT Delhi and then built to build a SaaS product scaled across various South Asian
Right.
countries. And then he decided to shut it down and join us and take care of tech at
Right.
Beach. The fourth founder, Daya was working across various agri-tech companies. So Daya comes up with a very deep understanding about rural grassroots, about
Right.
agri value chain, dairy, and all of those products, right? So he actually understands how Bharat looks like, right?
Right.
From product point of view, from psychology point of view, from user pain point of view, I would say.
Right.
There's a graduate of ITBHU,
Hmm.
and then he joined us. He takes care of ground operations, and I the last one. So I'm graduate of NIT Meghalaya, after which I joined ZS, a pharma consulting firm.
Right.
Then joined Cobasco in early days. Uh, I was leading their decision making team over there.
Hmm.
Worked closely with founders, right, to understand in a similar space. The business model was a bit different.
Right.
Worked across a couple of markets within India, Northern India, South India, and a couple of mandis across Nepal. Tried to realize pain points across all the Asian markets, right? Asian
Right.
fruit and vegetables market to be specific. And after moving out of Cobasco, we started PJ. So starting Bijak was not easy, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
and not because I would say, of course, like every startup has certain
Sure.
problems in starting, but the bigger problem was to figure out how actually you want to start. What is the best business model, or what is the best problem you want to solve? So
Right.
Agri being a very, I would say, fragmented space, there were multiple problems which were there to be solved, right?
Sure.
And you have to basically take a call, right? Most of the time in agri tech, it's that feeling of like doing everything, right? It kinds of
Right.
pulls you or spoils you as a
Right.
company, right? So the space is very fragmented, which means there is ample opportunity, right? Everything you
Right.
like to do, you'll see a opportunity, right? So the
Right.
moment you'll try to source something, you'll see that there is immense opportunity in sourcing.
Right.
After sourcing, you'll basically come to know that of course quality check bhi kar sakte hain. There is a immense opportunity available in doing quality check, then packaging, then transportation, the entire supply chain, and then on the other end it's basically figuring out who are the potential buyers, what is the best price, and owning a supply chain on the destination end, right? So we wanted to become a platform, basically a tech first company, right? There were multiple agri-tech startups at that point of time as well, I do remember, and we wanted to become a tech first startup. That was the
Right.
entire goal when V5. So we used to have multiple discussion in the early days of Egypt, right?
Right.
That was the only thing we used to have, right? Either do a market research or discuss the entire problem internally,
Right.
right? So I mean, we were still not very clear with the business model, but the
Mm-hmm.
only thing which we were kind of very adamant was that we'll become a tech first company, right? We will
Right.
not be a very operationally heavy company.
Right.
And this was the reason I think Bijak was able to scale very fast in early
Mhm.
days. It's very
Right.
lean team. So right now also we have like close to 100-member team managing 28 different states.
Right.
So huge responsibilities with a
Sure.
bigger ticket size. But I would say like tech has played a very major role in this scale as well as management of these uh,
I think, and
transactions.
we're going to talk more about that, Nikhil, right? I want to understand the construct of Bijak, right? Like you highlighted, right? I mean, agriculture is something which can, which can, I mean, it can overwhelm you, right? When you kind
Correct.
of enter it, right? From the kind of opportunities that could throw, right? And
Correct.
the sheer volumes that are there in India, right? And I think every state has a very different, consumption appetite, production appetite, right? The
Correct.
complexity is absolutely crazy,
Different.
right? In fact, I was in a recent conversation, right?
Mhm.
And the gentleman who I was hosting, we were just talking about one particular startup, just which is kind of cragged warehousing for a state of Bihar, right? And we were talking about the value that it's created, the kind of impact that's created, and it's absolutely bizarre, right? And given what you tell me that you're working in 28 states, right? I think is just goes on to demonstrate how large a play that you've built, right? I think I'd love to understand the construct of BJF, right? Who are the stakeholders? Where does your tech stack sit, right? What is it enabling? I think it'll be lovely to sort of understand that
Sure,
uh,
sure. So
architecture.
at Bijak, we are trying to empower the various aggregators as well as
Okay.
mandi aartis of the
Sure.
value chain. So to help you understand with an example, if we talk about potatoes, let's say potatoes are majorly grown across two districts of UP,
Hmm.
Agra and Kannauj.
Right.
If I talk about a potato grower in Agra, let's say there is a farmer who grows potato. Then there
Right.
is a local aggregator aggregating from 5 to 10 different farmers
Sure.
and bringing the volume at a truck level so that it
Right.
could be easily shipped to various part of India.
Hmm.
And then the local aggregator aggregates the potatoes, packs it, grade it, sort it, and ship it to, let's say, a
Right.
mandi in Bangalore, right? Yeshwanthpur market or Electronic City market. Then there is a buyer in Bangalore who kind
Hmm.
of receives this truck, unloads it, and sells it to various distributors. The
Right.
distributor would sell it to retailer, and then it comes to consumers like us,
Hmm.
right? So
Right.
we essentially help these local aggregators to find the best uh, mandi aartis across India. So
Right.
we deal with anyone who can buy or sell at a truck level, as simple
Hmm.
as that
Okay.
in layman's term. So we deal across 100 commodities and
Hmm.
give you an opportunity to buy or sell from more than 1,200 locations in India.
Okay.
So as you rightly mentioned, right, every commodity comes up with its own, I would say, specification, right? Of
Right.
course, which includes both challenges as well as opportunity. So
Right.
a potato grower would be having a very different challenge compared to a strawberry grower.
Right.
Or maybe someone who wants to sell ginger from Shillong would need a very different market compared to someone who wants to sell his onion from Nasik,
Right.
right? So Bijak as a platform not only gives you, I would say it's not just a platform where you discover the counterparties, but we
Mhm.
also help you in executing these trades, right? So we
Okay.
give you an end-to-end solution, which includes starting anything from discovering counterparties, knowing their past records, coming up with
Mhm.
their ratings, then arranging logistics for your transactions, and towards the end, right, ending the entire transaction with helping you with payments on a set tenure. So
Mhm.
our tech platforms helps you in discovering parties, knowing rates, keeping a ledger of all the transactions you have made, sending payments digitally, arranging
Mhm.
logistics remotely on just click of a button, and of course, like there are multiple other sub features, but these are the major attraction what we have seen in past. So
Interesting.
yep.
Interesting. Nikhil, I mean, trade is something, across all of these markets has continued to happen, right? It's
Mhm.
not something which was, which happened like recently, right?
Correct,
It's
correct,
existed, right? These are
correct,
parties which have known each other, right? There was a
correct,
trust
correct, correct,
ecosystem that got built, right?
correct, correct.
And of course, then there was, once that trust ecosystem came together,
Mhm.
then there was a certain quality assurance, and
Correct.
that came in, and then of course there was payment terms which got better,
Mhm.
right? What
Mhm.
is it that Bijak has changed in the process, right?
So,
Uh,
so
I mean, what kind of an impact has it created in the lives of, say, for example, producers, aggregators, and eventually the distributors at a mandi level and different market, right? What has changed with Bijak's
Yep, Ashu.
intervention?
So what I have seen in past that if you speak to 18, 18 out of 20 B2B players in agri space, right?
Sure.
Hardly 2 out of 20 people would talk about margin, and 18 people would be concerned more of their principal money, right?
Right. Correct.
So because all of these trades, 80% of trade occurs on credit, right?
Right.
So if you're sending your truck, you'll need an assurance on your principal money. That is something
Right.
which concerns you more, right?
Sure.
So at Bijak, we have changed that phenomena. We have basically democratized this market. So
Right.
earlier, let's say if a supplier was based out of Kannauj in UP, he would deal with ideally 10 to 15 different buyers across India.
Mhm.
Even if there is a 16th player which is offering better rate, but I would say a faster payment cycle or a better margin, right?
Mhm.
The person would be kind of hesitant to trade with him because he's
Right.
not sure if I send my truck whether I'll get even my principal money back or not, right?
Right.
And these are people who do trade on a daily basis, so they don't
Mhm.
have much time to enter into legal arrangements or kind of to
Right.
file a police complaint if they're not receiving money and all of those things.
Right.
We have changed that entire mentality of people, right? So right now it's as good as any of the e-commerce platform where you can
Right.
choose out of thousands of buyers you have, right? And
Right.
sell to any of them without even thinking about all of these issues, right? All you must be concerned about right now is the kind of price you are able to get. So I'll give you an
Okay.
example.
Right.
There is a buy. It was during last lockdown, right? Last
Mhm.
April, not this April. There
Right.
was a buyer of bananas based out of Vashi, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't a local aggregator. He was a big farmer, I would say, who holds like multiple acres of land, and
Right.
he wanted to sell banana.
Mhm.
The best price he was getting at that point of time was 2 rupees per kg.
Right.
So it was a raw banana, and raw bananas are sold on a per kg basis.
Right.
Through Bijak, he discovered a buyer based out of Saharanpur,
Mhm.
UP,
Right.
and he was able to get a price of 7 rupees per kg. Right?
Okay.
So 3 times of what he was initially getting.
Right.
And this is not on a kg level, this is on a truck level, right? A truck is
Okay.
roughly of 10,000 kgs.
Right.
So on every truck, he was getting an additional price of like 50,000,
Mhm.
which is huge for these people, right?
Right.
They don't have a very big or fat margin in this business,
Sure.
right? And this is
Sure.
something which will help him to, I mean, give better facilities to his family for an entire year, because
Right.
these big farmers, they have a big land, but they'll essentially be selling twice or thrice in a year.
Right.
So we have seen that change in multiple spaces. So from Kannauj, we were the first who kind of enabled these players to sell their produce to Gurgaon, right?
Right.
Earlier, there was nobody has even thought of like sending their truck
Sure.
from Kannauj to Gurgaon, because
Right.
everybody from Agra used to send to Gurgaon. It was
Right.
kind of closer. It used to save on their
Right.
price of logistics. But the kind of produce Kannauj people were having, it was highly appreciated by Gurgaon
Mhm.
buyers, and then the demand kind of increased. So we have seen a change in the commodity shipment pattern, I would say. We have changed,
Mhm.
we have kind of established new relationship, and this has kind of changed the way the buyer or seller used to trade. So now even even with their existing buyers, right, the supplier would want to trade through Bijak rather than trading directly, because this would at least ensure them or give them a guarantee that there is a third party which is keeping a track of entire transaction.
Very interesting. Nikhil, what I want to understand is that,
Mhm,
when you talk of, for example, enabling this, right? Are
mhm,
you working as an underwriter, right? What is Bijak's role, right? Are you
correct,
essentially a marketplace where people can come in and just discover each other, or
correct.
are you their partner in that entire trade cycle as well?
So, Ashu, I mean, there were multiple other platforms where you could essentially, I would say, discover a counterparty, but it was of
Right.
no use because it
Sure.
wasn't coming up with values, right?
Correct.
So let's say if I tell you that you want to sell your produce XYZ, and if
Hmm.
I tell you, yeah, there is a buyer based out of Bihar who wants to buy
Right.
their produce, and
Right.
that's it, right? It doesn't solve the purpose of phone
Hmm.
number, right? You would want the, I mean, history behind it, right? How is
Correct.
the buyer good or bad? What is
Right.
the typical payment cycle? What if the buyer doesn't pay? Who is going to
Hmm.
pay me, right? What is the basis that you are saying that it is a good buyer, right?
Hmm.
So these were the kind of pain points we realized. So digitizing these subjective knowledge, right? These are all subjective knowledge, right? पहले ऐसा होता था कि you'll ask another seller, right? कि आपके
Right.
पास कोई उड़ीसा में buyer है क्या? Do you have any other buyer in Orissa? And based on his feedback, you'll try to ship your produce. And
Sure.
if that shipment goes wrong, nobody is there to take an
Right.
accountability. Right? So
Right.
At Bijak, we have created a rating for all of these buyers, right?
Hmm.
So we have told, and these ratings are at a buyer level, at a commodity level. You can put multiple filters, play with
Right.
it, play with locations level filter, and then
Right.
kind of choose a buyer, right?
Right.
So essentially, what we have seen, people would at times, if people trade through app, that's well and good. In
Hmm.
couple of cases, they'll directly call to our customer support team and ask, यार 4.5 के ऊपर रेटिंग वाला कोई एक बायर बता दो, मेरा
Right.
ये माल है, मुझे यहाँ से यहाँ बेचना है. And then
Hmm.
we kind of suggest like these are top 10 players. You can choose any of them and basically you can trade with them, right? So that is something what we have changed. I won't say it's a pure underwriting kind of thing. It's more of like market intelligence which comes into picture where you have to take into account multiple things, right? So it's
Right.
not very simple compared to credit underwriting because there are multiple other aspects, right?
Right.
अगर market का rate crash हो जाता है, let's suppose then what
Right.
if the demand or what if the supply exceeds demand
Sure.
on a very particular date, right?
Right.
How does that buyer behaves? There is a
Mhm.
specific pattern, right? We
Right.
try to create that pattern through the data flowing through the platform and then come up with a rating, right? So that rating gives sense of multiple things and which kind of helps the supplier to select best buyer, right? And it helps them create multiple new relationships, and every time they can change a buyer, right? So let's say earlier there was the pattern used to be like you need to trade with only 16 buyers. So
Right.
basically you need to give continuous supply to these 16 pairs only,
Hmm.
even if it's going on profit or loss, because it's a perishable commodity, right? You need to clear
Hmm.
inventories as well. But now they have like close to 1,000 players to choose from. So
Right.
that is something which has changed. Of course, rating being a bigger enabler over here.
Nikhil, I would love to understand. Can you give me a little more, construct of, or can you give me a little more understanding of the rating and ranking mechanism, right? Because to my understanding,
Mhm.
essentially, given the nature of these transactions, unlike say a food delivery business, right,
Correct, correct.
where the transaction size is very small, even if you go wrong, right, you'll possibly go rate. This
Mhm.
is an inconsequential amount of money which you've kind of transacted for, right? In
Correct.
this case, it's a cyclical business, right? It's not a business which is sort of say the trade is not happening every day, right? And like you sort of gave an example of, right,
Mhm.
that there
Mhm.
are only about 2 or 3 cycles that and a seller is going to get in the market, right? So
Mhm.
what's the construct of rating and ranking, right? What are some of the parameters that go into
Mhm.
that assessment?
Correct. So that answers a part. I mean, that brings another point over here, Ashu.
Sure.
So let's talk about from buyer point of view. They are also having certain problems, right?
Right.
So let's say if I talk about a buyer from Patna, Bihar,
Mhm.
there are two different locations from which it can source onion, Indore or
Sure.
Maharashtra, right?
Right.
MP or Maharashtra. Now, let's say in season one, the guy is good, and there are multiple other seasonal supplies from Alwar in Rajasthan or the
Right.
local supplies. Now, the buyer is good, his rating is good, but he has network only in one location. So all
Right.
the good buyers, right, they have a very strong hold in one location, but
Mhm.
they're not able to get supplies from other location.
Right.
सो जितने महीने नासिक की सप्लाई चलती है वो बायर का वॉल्यूम बहुत हाई रहता है.
Right.
जैसे ही नासिक का सीजन खत्म डिप होता है
Right.
और फिर अगले 3 क्वार्टर कुछ नहीं होगा उसके पास,
Mhm.
राइट, या बहुत बेयर मिनिमम सप्लाई होगी.
Right.
So we have enabled these players to carry forward their goodwill value, right? You
Right.
realize. So for if you behave very good with suppliers from Nasik, and I am the one who is creating a rating based on these transactions, I'll immediately start suggesting your platform to suppliers from MP as well or from Alvar as well, that you
Okay.
can supply to this buyer because he's good. I have taken a record of, let's say, 1,000 past transaction, and this
Right.
is his rating based on past 1,000 transaction. These were the major red flags, right? Or these are the major concerns कि उसको क्वालिटी खराब बिल्कुल नहीं चलती है या उसको
Right.
पैकिंग 50 kg वाली ही चलती है, 48 kgs जब भी होते हैं उसको लॉस बहुत ज्यादा होता है, तो आपको भी थोड़ा लॉस हो सकता है.
Right.
We kind of keep these ratings ready based on past transaction. So the
Okay.
buyer also has a very good value because now his volume won't dip only because there is a seasonal change, right?
Right.
Similarly, from seller point of view, there was so if I talk about potatoes or onion, let's say, right? For a normal user like us, it's a simple potato or onion, but there is a specification within potatoes as well, right?
Right.
सिंदूरी है, लाल गुलाल है, कंचन है,
Right.
वाइट पोटैटो है,
Right.
क्या साइज का है, राइट? अब कुछ सेलर ऐसे थे जिसके पास सिंदूरी का तो बायर है बट व्हाइट पोटैटो का नहीं, राइट? सो
Right.
देयर आर सेट ऑफ बायर्स who have a very strong I would say hold. There are set of sellers who have very strong hold of buyers in a very specific commodity within potato as well, right? A
Right.
specific type within a commodity, I would say.
Mhm.
Now we have helped them in enabling trade to other types of the same commodities as well,
Right.
right? अब कन्नौज में केवल आलू होता है, अनियन तो ग्रो नहीं होगा,
Hmm.
बट जब भी आलू ग्रो होता है आपको वो प्रॉब्लम नहीं रहेगी कि मैं केवल लाल गुलाल ही बेच पाता हूँ.
Right.
आप कंचन भी बेच सकते हो, आप सफेद आलू भी बेच सकते हो. So we have
Mhm.
opened multiple market for these people. Now this
Okay.
has helped them in increasing their volume because it's a seasonal business, right? They
Right.
have to do the entire volume within first 4 months, and then there would be a dip for 4 months, and then next 4 months would be of cold storage.
Right.
Right? So that's how the entire 12-month season looks for these suppliers. We have held them similarly in case of Maharashtra. We have seen वहाँ पे multiple other commodities भी होती हैं. So fruits और
Mhm.
onion साथ में होते हैं. We have
Right.
seen a couple of sellers of onion who have started selling fruits as well, right? क्योंकि फ्रूट्स में उनका नेटवर्क नहीं था तो पहले इसलिए वो नहीं बेच रहे थे.
Right.
बट विथ बीजक, राइट, दे ट्राइड विथ अनियन सक्सेसफुल हुआ तो थोड़ा वॉल्यूम बढ़ा, एंड नाउ दे
Mhm.
हैव स्टार्टेड अक्रॉस लाइक 4-5 डिफरेंट कमोडिटीज सेलिंग अक्रॉस वेरियस लोकेशन. सो दिस इज द वैल्यू एड
Interesting.
वी हैव डन विदाउट चेंजिंग देयर लोकेशन, क्योंकि वो लोकेशन वाली चीज उनकी थोड़ी है जो वो चेंज नहीं करेंगे.
Right.
सो sellers would want to stick to their location.
Interesting. Interesting. Nikhil, एक जो चीज which is very important when you talk about agriculture, right? And I think any commodity, right? That is true for grains. That is true for produce like potato, horticulture. I mean everything, right? Is quality, right? And I think that's a massive. And like you said, right? Within potatoes, there are
Multiple
8, 10
types of
different versions,
potatoes.
right? Very, very different types, right? And I think each market has a very different consumption appetite, right?
Correct.
How do you ascertain the quality, right? Because I mean, if it just becomes very, very difficult, right? So how do you go about ensuring that there is a right? Because if a transaction has happened, the shipment has already happened, right?
Correct.
A rating and a ranking is a post-event activity, right? Which and there is a lag to it, right? How do you ensure that it happens in real time, right? I mean, is there a play where it happens before the trade? Can the buyer go on for some sampling, before they go on to say book that order or procure that order or something like that, right? Is there some mechanism that is available to ensure that there is quality assurance in the process?
I mean, we can break this into two different parts, Ashu.
Sure.
So basically, the first one is perishables, and second one is non-perishable.
Sure.
In case of non-perishable, still the quality issues are very less because you have very clear cut demarcation. कि मुझे मॉइस्चर लेवल इतना चलता है, फंगस लेवल इतना चलता है, ग्रेन साइज ये चाहिए, ग्रेन काउंट ये चाहिए, ऑल ऑफ दैट. सो नॉन पेरिशेबल्स में उतने इशू नहीं आते. पेरिशेबल्स में यू आर ऑलमोस्ट 80% ट्रू. 80% केसेस में कुछ ना कुछ इशू आते हैं. अगेन व्हाट वी हैव सीन, क्वालिटी इज समथिंग व्हिच इज वेरी सब्जेक्टिव थिंग, राइट? मैं if we both talk, right, and let's say if I talk about my own computer, आपको शायद ये कंप्यूटर मैं 50,000 का सेल करूँ तो शायद खराब लगेगा कि क्वालिटी अच्छी नहीं है. What if I give the same computer at 3 rupees, right? You may find it interesting, right? So again, it's very subjective, and I would say quality is always related to price. किस प्राइस पे बायर को मिला है ना. अब हमारे केस में जो एक सबसे बड़ी चीज है, राइट, विच इज अ वेरी बिग थंब रूल, बाइबल ऑफ द बिजनेस, आई वुड से, हम कभी भी नए बायर और नए सेलर को मैच नहीं कराते. Which means कि if the buyer is new to platform, we won't match him to new seller. If the seller is new to platform, we won't match him to new buyer. Even if they both want to trade with each other, we'll clearly say an upfront kind of warning कि यार इनका significant data नहीं है. And the same goes to seller as well, right? Now to solve this problem, what we have done, sir, we unless we have a significant amount of data for every buyer, right? We don't kind of recommend that buyer over a platform as an eligible buyer to transact over platform. And when I talk about significant data, it's not only the payment amount or the transaction amount. We see discrete level data. So Bijak आता है हमारे पास invoice आता है every transaction का. We try to match that invoice with other counterparties, right? Let's say there are 10 different buyers within a mandi. We try to see कि आज सिंदूरी किसने कितने में बेचा है, right? कौन अपने seller को कितना प्राइस देगा, या फिर आज मार्केट क्रैश हुआ था तो कौन सा बायर ऐसा है जिसने अपने सेलर को बढ़िया पूरा प्राइस दिया है कमिटेड प्राइस, कौन सा बायर ऐसा है जिसने क्वालिटी कंसर्न रेज कर दी है, राइट? एंड देन वी ट्राई टू मैप कि अगर सेम ही लोकेशन से 3 बायर्स को गया था माल, कि किस बायर को इशू आया किसको नहीं आया. एंड देन द लास्ट लेवल मैपिंग इज कि अगर सेम ही सेलर ने मल्टीपल बायर्स को भेजा है, सो किस बायर ने क्या रेज किया है नहीं किया है. And then based on overall transaction, so there are multiple data points we check and then we create a composite score out of it. Okay. There is no science behind it. And the biggest problem is these are very thin margin business, right? So एक आलू के ट्रक पे जो effective realized margin है seller को 4,000 रुपए है, 4,000 to 6,000 rupees है. If the buyer actually travels from Bangalore to Agra, right, and goes back after sampling के बाद भी श्योर तो नहीं होगा कि वही सामान आने वाला. What if I show you different sample and send you something else? Right. And 6,000 is something जिसमें तो आपका आना जाना भी नहीं होगा, right? So all of these business work on a trust basis. What we have solved that we have objectified to the transaction. Now they see us as a third party की एक third party है जो सारे transaction record करती है. More of like CIBIL score in banking, right? सिबिल रिकवरी के लिए तो नहीं आता है और जब भी आप लोन डिफॉल्ट करते हो, बट बेस्ड ऑन सिबिल स्कोर ही बैंक आपको लोन देता है ना. सिबिल खराब है तो बैंक आपको नहीं देगा, या एक मिनिमम कट ऑफ रखते हैं बैंक. राइट, दैट इज द मिनिमम कट ऑफ. बेस्ड ऑन रिस्क एपेटाइट ऑफ कोर्स योर मार्जिन इंक्रीजेस बट रिस्क आल्सो इंक्रीजेस. सो अब जब हमसे रिकमेंडेशन कोई मांगता है हम बोलते हैं 4.5 के नीचे मत करो आप. बट देन देयर आर पीपल हु से कि नहीं मैं इस बायर को जानता हूँ ऑल्दो रेटिंग 4 है बट मैं करना चाहता हूँ और आई एम ओके विथ इट, राइट? Then there are people who will say कि नहीं मुझे 3.5 वाला भी बाहर चलेगा बट आसाम में ही करना है. आपकी प्लेटफॉर्म पे 3.5 है तो चलो कुछ तो आएगा, ऐसा नहीं कि बिल्कुल जीरो होगा. एंड देन देयर आर पीपल जो 3 के नीचे हैं जो हम दिखाते ही नहीं, राइट? वी डोंट रेकमेंड समवन हैविंग लेसर रेटिंग देन 3. Okay. Interesting. Nikhil, in this case, do you do pricing recommendation as well, saying that this is the buy price which is happening? So that do you have those indicators which are there? That is a independent value over platform जहाँ पे आप एक मंडी वाइज प्राइस देख सकते हो. So हम हर मंडी के आपको मॉडल प्राइस दिखा देते हैं कि इस मंडी का ये रेंज चल रहा है. And then the price and quality negotiation is something which buyer and seller discuss on their own. Okay. So we keep that as a transparent. We don't act as a black box कि हम आपको buyer नहीं बताएंगे या buyer को seller नहीं बताएंगे. That is kind of open. Buyer and seller freely interact with each other. दोनों को सब कुछ पता होता है. ट्रक कब निकल रहा है, कब पहुंच रहा है, किस प्राइस पे जा रहा है. They both decide on their own. Interesting. Nikhil, I have a question around, there are very important points that you highlighted, right? And especially the civil point that you highlighted, right? Civil-like structure that you've created at Bijak, right? Now I understand why CIBIL is, right, and I think it's a chosen path by many financial institutions, right, where they're pooling in their data, and so that the possibility of default kind of gets reduced, right? Correct. But what CIBIL also does is that it captures a lot of other transactional data, your payment track records and stuff like that, right? The frequency in an ecosystem like that is much higher. Wherein when you talk of say Bijak, right, now there are seasonality issues, there are climatic issues, there are production issues, and there are many issues, right? And these are not businesses that are transacting on a day-to-day basis, right? So where the buyer. Yep, Ashu. So just to correct, we don't deal directly with farmers. The story of farmer was one of the case. Usually in our case, we deal with B2B buyers and sellers, right? Sure. So if I talk about supply, it's still kind of fragmented. But in buyer's case, they'll do a transaction through our platform every second or third day for sure. Interesting. Now, my point to you is that, and which is essentially what I was getting to, is that you still not, Bijak is still to become the 100% go-to platform, right? Correct. There'll still be mechanics which are outside of Bijak, right? That essentially means that you only have information which is of transactions that are happening on your platform, right? Correct. You will not have transaction information which is outside of the system. That's I think one. So even if we cannot take that into account, right? So even if I know कि उसी transaction में कुछ गलत चला, But if that has not occurred through platform, we cannot take that into account.
Correct. Now, the other thing is that and I'm talking more about the possibility of default, right? And that's the question that I want to actually
Correct.
answer, right?
Mhm,
Is that when a buyer is going and buying, right? Now, a
mhm,
buyer is subject to many systemic aspects as well, right?
mhm.
And you do not necessarily know the credit profile of the buyer, right?
Correct.
Which could possibly lead into an event of default, right?
Correct.
Are there mechanics in terms of or ways in which you secure the seller, right? I mean, what
Correct.
is the mechanics of ensuring? Because these are parties which are unrelated. They're
Correct.
essentially coming on and transacting on the platform because there is a certain transparency that you've been able to bring in, but it's
Correct.
still a financial transaction. The
Mhm.
margins are very slender, which
Yeah.
essentially means the if they go wrong, they'll possibly bleed for a very long time.
Correct.
What
Correct.
is it that you do to ensure that there is no delinquency that happens, or there is no bad trade that happens in the process?
Correct. So that's why I shared Ashu, right? Uh, for us, it makes complete sense to lose our own business, honestly speaking, rather than doing or pushing our seller to a risky business, right? So मेरे लिए आज की डेट में, although I know personally, right? Let's say मैं आपको personally जानता हूँ, and there is a case जहाँ पे आप मुझे बोलते हो कि यार मुझे आपके platform के through ये purchase करना है. I won't allow you to purchase through platform on credit until and unless I have a limited or a fixed number of data points of your transaction, which is like essentially 3 months or 6 months kind of transactional data point before starting, right? So it's not like an e-commerce platform जहाँ पे कोई भी आके other e-commerce platform जहाँ पे कुछ भी आके आप खरीद बेच सकते हो, क्योंकि वहाँ पे ticket size essentially बहुत छोटा है with a decent margin, right? As you mentioned. So over here we typically allow people only when they have a credit history with us. वहाँ पे we kind of give them a credit rating and overall rating जहाँ से वो ले सकते हैं. The other way would be you pay everything on advance and then only trade with the sellers, right? And the same goes with seller as well, right? This is the reason what you said, right? कि कुछ transaction है जो बिना प्लेटफॉर्म के होते होंगे, अब उनमें चांसेस ऑफ डिफॉल्ट बहुत बढ़ जाएंगे. यू रियलाइज, राइट? इफ देयर इज अ सेलर हु वांट टू डू अ ट्रांजैक्शन ऑन my buyer, let's say he has discovered the buyer through platform but he wants to supply outside platform, उस केस में चांसेस ऑफ डिफॉल्ट बहुत हाई है क्योंकि वो बीजेक के थ्रू मॉनिटर नहीं होगा एंड इट डजंट इम्पैक्ट इट्स रेटिंग, राइट?
Right. Very interesting. Nikhil, I think one thing which is very clear is that there is an impact that you're creating on the lives of these transacting parties, right? And they're essentially parties who are dealing in rural areas, and who are limited by possibilities, right? Have you ever gotten a chance to evaluate the kind of impact that you've created, right? I mean, is there a metric around that you've been able to go back and kind of reflect back, saying that these are people who were exposed to just about 5, 7, 10 transactions, right? Or possibilities of transactions. And here we are, we've enabled them to say 30, 40 different possibilities, right? What are some of those impact points that, you've been measuring, right? And how is, say, for example, the commercial impact has happened on these trading parties?
So Ashu, I'll give you a conservative figure, right? I won't talk about the edge cases जहाँ पे
Right.
हमने बहुत abrupt कुछ कर दिया था क्योंकि वो एक
Right.
आध transaction में होता है.
Right.
Usually B2B में आप average बहुत ज़्यादा change नहीं कर पाओगे, right?
Right. Right.
It's not a case कि जहाँ पे आपको farmer का 10 किलो बिकवाना है और वो आप 5 टाइम पे बेच पाओगे.
Mhm.
I'm talking about like 20,000,
Correct.
30,000 kgs of commodities on a every transactional basis,
Right.
right? So right now Bijak sees close to like 7,000 such transactions on a monthly basis,
Okay.
doing close to 2,000, 3,000 tons on a daily basis.
Mhm.
Uh, every ton is like close to 1,000 kgs.
Right.
So right now on an annual basis, we are able to liquidate produce worth of 0.5 billion,
Mhm.
right? That's huge, I would say, compared
Right.
to the team size we have. Now,
Sure.
coming back to actual impact, what we have created, right, Ashu? I do remember a couple of stories which I personally realized, or
Mhm.
where I was personally kind of impressed by
Right.
the team members, right? The kind of impact they were able. The
Sure.
first one was the banana trader, right?
Right.
I mean, helping someone to get the price of seven instead of two for three trucks, right? Close to like 50,000, 60,000 kgs of quantity. This
Right.
was a huge, right? Whosoever did within team, right? I would say,
Right.
uh, it's a kind of tremendous job, right? You have changed the entire cycle of that guy. I
Right.
still remember a very funny story. There was a buyer in Assam, right? So buyer was kind of he used to kind of make 5,000 to 10,000 rupees on a truck basis, and he
Right.
used to do 5-6 trucks on a monthly basis. So
Mhm.
महीने में 50-60,000 was something he was earning.
Right.
And all of a sudden he was onboarded on our platform. उसको कहीं से देखा होगा Facebook पे या कहीं ad पे. And then he wanted to do trade through us. We did not allow because we don't have a credit history of the guy.
Right.
He wanted to do a trade on advance. He said कि मैं पूरा advance देने को ready हूँ. The problem is I cannot trade directly with seller because what if I pay money and he doesn't send stock, right?
Sure.
Nobody's there to catch up.
Right.
So I want that trade to be passed through you,
Right.
right? And then we kind of arranged a seller for this guy.
Right.
And it was a strange story for us, somebody, because Assam was a new market for us at that point
Right.
of time. And then that guy was able to make close to 3 lakh rupees on that single transaction because of price change. So
Right.
जब तक नासिक से वहां ट्रक पहुंचा था, it was time of Dashera.
Right.
The onion price kind of shooted up massively.
Right.
That guy went for a leave for like next 1.5 months.
Right.
This is like kind of margin for my next 1.5 month, right? I want to spend some time with my family because I haven't been able to give time. But coming back to impact, right? These are the edge cases story, to be honest, right, Ashu?
Right.
The real impact what we have created, right? So our on an average, our seller volume has increased from 5 trucks to 8 trucks on a weekly basis,
Wow.
right? Of potatoes. In case of onion, that has almost doubled in most of the cases. We have been able to see new trade relationship getting developed in almost every seller case. So almost all of our primary seller जिन्होंने platform का बाकी services use किए, in almost 80% of cases they have tried a new buyer through platform. We have seen almost 60% of trade passing through us in most of the buyers case. Having a retention rate of close to 40% of our power users. So users who have done at least 5 transactions through platform, they are kind of continuous user over platform. And most of it was through tech because 200, the overall team size of Bijak is 200, out of which there are 100 people in operations. So 100 people managing 28 states, you realize, right, the kind of pressure.
Absolutely. I think
Ideally तो केवल यूपी ही मैनेज करने में 74 डिस्ट्रिक्ट हैं, तो आपको 70 लोग लग जाने चाहिए. But because of 1200 locations, right, every person is able to manage 12 locations. And then we have seen trade across locations जहाँ के नाम भी हमको पहले नहीं पता थे, right? So I've seen people trading ginger from Shillong. People all the way trading tender coconut recently during COVID. जब बाकी लोग tender coconut का shortage था. We have seen sellers coming through Bijak and then supplying. We have seen multiple philanthropy organization using Bijak as a sourcing platform and supplying vegetable kits to people out of Maharashtra. So there was a Donate Cart is another startup which kind of used Bijak platform to distribute ration kits to 70,000 families in Mumbai. We did not charge even a penny on that, right? And we connected them with various FPOs. So helping FPOs to have a market access is something I would say is kind of created an impact directly to the farmers. Now we have a different thesis. What we see that as and when our suppliers earning grows, right, our farmers earning is definitely going to grow because these what ideally Bijak wants is to make suppliers compete among each other, right? So जब भी आप एक फार्मर हो और मैं और कोई और एक सप्लायर है, हम दोनों ही आपसे प्रोड्यूस खरीदना चाहते हैं, तभी तो आपको बेटर प्राइस मिलेगा. अभी तो सिचुएशन अलग है, आप फार्मर हो, आपने कुछ उगा लिया, यू आर कमिंग टू सेल टू वेरियस पीपल एंड पीपल आर सेइंग नहीं, क्वालिटी अच्छी नहीं है तुम्हारी, हम तो नहीं लेंगे. दैट्स व्हाट जनरली हैपेंस, राइट? वी वांट टू चेंज दैट एंटायर डायनामिक. आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट पीपल आर गोइंग टू लूज मनी ऑन टेबल, but I want the market to be fair to everyone, right? You need to be accountable to everyone, even if it's a poor farmer or a wealthy trader or a poor trader or a buyer or a seller, everyone, right? People needs to be accountable to their own duties, right? You cannot exploit someone just because he doesn't has a upper hand in that trade, right? What if you have sent your truck, the problem you were discussing, right? किसी ने ट्रक भेज दिया, अब तो कुछ नहीं कर सकता वो. So all of those dynamics have changed. That is the impact I see was a bigger impact. And then there are various edge cases stories, right?
Interesting. Nikhil, when we talk of what you're dealing with is essentially essentially a mandi level operation, right? And there is a huge arbitrage, there's a huge opaqueness. When you talk about mandi operation, right? And the pricing and the way trade happens, right? And you know what I'm talking about, right? The practices that are there, right? And these are these are very, very weird practices, right? In terms of price discovery and the way it happens, right? And I think you're kind of disrupting all of that. Now, you know, one kind of very if you're talking to any startup which is kind of playing at that level, has a last mile, has somebody deployed at the last mile, right? Is that the case in your playbook? I mean, is that something that you do also, where you have people at the last mile, who are essentially ensuring that there is right kind of input which is coming in? So, I mean, do you have a team deployment at a mandi level as well, or not so much?
So the 100-member team I'm talking about, right?
Sure.
They are closely. I mean, everyone is deployed at a mandi level, so we don't have offices across different locations. The only office they have is mandi, right? So हर रोज वो किसी एक मंडी होता है, अगली मंडी होता है. But I would say the operationally this is something which cannot be scaled, right? 7,000 mandis are there in India. जो बड़ी मंडी है, close to 28,000 थोड़ी छोटी मंडी है. So अब आप 28,000 लोग की टीम तो नहीं संभाल पाओगे, honestly speaking, right? It needs to be solved through tech. आप ऑफ से एक लेवल तक सॉल्व कर सकते हो. I'm not against operationally heavy businesses, but there is a level to which you can solve this, right? This is a problem which needs to be solved through tech. So what we have done, we have tried to use the data point which of the live trades, right? अभी मंडी का प्राइस 500 रुपए है. I'm taking a very hypothetical scenario कि let's say if someone says कि potato price of Azadpur mandi in Delhi is 500 rupees per bag, right? And but the realized price to a seller is only 490 rupees, right? Essentially 490 is a number the seller would be interested in, right? मंडी का प्राइस कुछ भी उसको फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. Essentially seller को कितना मिल रहा है, right? So and that data comes only out of Bijak, right? Bijak में कितना पैसा ट्रांसफर हुआ है, what is the transferred amount or the final payment value, right? What if you are saying कि mandi price is 500 but all the produce which was coming from Kannauj were getting only 450 or 460 rupees because Kannauj वाले potato का वही price था. So that is something which we were able to solve through tech because we see an outflow of 2,000, 3,000 tons on a daily basis, right? Across commodities. So we are able to judge कि exactly किस मंडी में किसका क्या price चल रहा है, and mandi prices are the best way to get through. So mandi prices are the first level, I would say, are seller check, जिसके basis पे वो decide करते हैं किस मंडी में trade करना. And then after putting a filter on that mandi name, they try to they get a list of buyers, and for their commodity they can put a filter on commodity as well. Then they can choose the best buyer out of it. So our ground ops team is only there to act as a face of the company because most of these people, they are not very literate, right? So अब हमेशा वो पॉइंट आता है कि यार मैं साल का आपके साथ 1 मिलियन 1.5 मिलियन, राइट? व्हाट दिस इज मेरे साल का 10 करोड़ का काम है या 6 करोड़ का काम है. मैं आपके साथ 6 करोड़ का काम तो कर लूंगा, बट कोई मुझसे आके एक बार मिल ले तो मुझे भी यकीन हो जाएगा. आई जस्ट वांट टू हैव अ फेस टू your name, right? I've heard your name, good names. I've already spoken to you, right? So CX team की तरफ से आता है कि सर इस मंडी में अगर एक बार कोई चला जाए, बस एक बार जाना होता है, आप एक बार चले जाओ, किसी एक को शक्ल दिखा दो, and then that local guy start acting as a campus ambassador thing, right? So within a market, if you have a person who has already used your service, he kind of act as our local ambassador. He refers other aadhatis or other seller. He'll explain them पूरे process कैसे work करता है. He'll guide them कि आपको यहाँ से सहायता बटन है, call करके क्या पूछना है पूछ सकते हो. And then the work keeps increasing, right?
Nikhil, you actually walked me into the next question, right? And and I think each one of us know that when you're dealing with rural, in a rural setting, right? And especially in a trade setting, right? That is not an area which is the most educated, right? That is an area जो कि touch and feel dependent है, right? They essentially see you. They think you're the right person to deal with. It's more instinctive in that sense, right?
Correct.
And that becomes important, right? How difficult was onboarding, right? I mean, today, of course, you are very way ahead of your starting point, right? But how difficult was that? I mean, do you still come across these impediments where people want, like you highlighted, right? That there is that visibility is required, right? How difficult was it, and how does it happen today, right? I mean, does this happen at regular intervals where your relationship manager will go and visit the stakeholders there? How does that thing happen today, right? And how difficult has this been?
I would say like things have easen out over time, as you mentioned, but of course, like there is still a need. Every time we want to open a new location, especially the supplier location, right? People would want someone to meet personally or get started with, right? So that is still a bottleneck to get started in new location. But all of our existing locations, right? 90% of problems are solved just within themselves, right? So there is a seller by name of Anurag, there is a seller by name of Pankaj in Kannauj. They both discuss कि यार मुझे ये problem आ रही है, कैसे solve होगी. And if in once in a 6 month or 7 months or an year, if I get a chance to visit those location, I came across this story कि मुझे ये problem थी, मैंने इनसे पूछा, इन्होंने बोला भाई ये तो इतना आसान है, आप सीधा यहाँ पे request कर सकते हो, right? So tech product, I do understand these people are technically handicapped, बहुत ज़्यादा tech से भी नहीं है या बहुत ज़्यादा apps use नहीं किए, but जो product भी आप देखोगे, right? Bijak as an app, right? If you see as a urban user, you will realize कि यार it's not a very I would say it's not a very fancy product, right? आपको बहुत अच्छी feel नहीं आएगी. You'll find it very कि यार बहुत cluttered है या बहुत अजीब है, right? But the entire product was made keeping in mind the rural audience, right? All of these people, उन वो किससे रिलेट कर पा रहे हैं, उनको डार्क ग्रीन कलर ज्यादा अच्छा लगता है, राइट? आपका लाइट शेड आपको पसंद है एज ऑडियंस, राइट? और यू वोंट फाइंड दोस बिग बटन्स वेरी फैंसी. आपको लगेगा यार छोटा बटन, स्पेस सेव करनी थी ना, एक ही तो स्क्रीन है, इतना बड़ा बटन कौन रखता है? या फिर ट्रक के लिए इतना बड़ा ट्रक की शेप क्यों चाहिए? आप सीधा TRUC के लिख तो मैं समझ जाऊंगा, बट आप रूरल ऑडियंस के एंड से सोचो, हमको उनके लिए भी प्रोडक्ट बनाना है जिसको पढ़ना ही नहीं आता. वी हैव यूजर हु हैव नेवर इवन वेंट टू अ फॉर्मल एजुकेशन काइंड ऑफ थिंग, जो थोड़ा बहुत उसने नंबर्स और डिजिट्स और बेसिक हिंदी सीखी है, वो काम करते करते सीखी है ओवर टाइम, राइट? कोई मुनीम के यहाँ काम करता था छोटे से, कोई अपने फादर के साथ बस चला जाता था मंडी. सो फॉर्मल एजुकेशन का कुछ लोग पार्ट भी नहीं रहे, उनके लिए प्रोडक्ट बनाना और फिर यूज कराना. सो स्टार्टिंग में वो काफी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम थी. इट वाज अ बिगर चैलेंज, राइट? सो दैट्स व्हाट आई सेड कि फर्स्ट 6 मंथ जो मार्केट रिसर्च में गए, वो वही क्रैक करने में गए कि कौन सी ऐसी चीजें जो ये लोग रिलेट कर पाते हैं, राइट? तो मल्टीपल टाइम्स वो मिस्टेक्स बाकी लोग फाउंडर्स ने भी देखी थी, मैंने खुद से भी देखी थी, कि हम प्रोडक्ट एक बार बना लेते हैं, देन वी ट्राई टू सेल इट, राइट? ये बीजक का पूरा जो डेवलपमेंट था, आई वुड से ये उनके साथ ही हुआ है. इनफैक्ट उनका कंट्रीब्यूशन 50% रहा है, हमारे खुद के प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर का शायद 20-30 रहा होगा, राइट? सो उनकी साइड से ज्यादा इनपुट आए हैं कि यार आप ये ऐसे करो, ये वाली चीज तो मुझे समझ ही नहीं आई, और वी वुड कम अप विद अ न्यू वर्जन एंड जस्ट गिव दैट एंड वी विल रियलाइज कि यार उधर तो उसका ध्यान ही नहीं किया, क्लिक तो छोड़ो, एक बार उधर ध्यान जाएगा तब तो क्लिक करेगा, राइट? So all of these things, product point of view से काफी solve हुआ है. Trust point of view से of course in starting it's kind of exponential curve. Starting में बहुत slow चीजें move होती हैं. हमको अभी पता है क्योंकि हमने पिछले 50 कमोडिटी में ये चीजें देख चुके हैं, right? But to a newcomer, right, every time they'll feel कि यार चीजें move ही नहीं हो रही, and all of a sudden after 2 months you'll be like कि अब volume ही manage नहीं हो रहा है. सर इतने कॉल आते हैं आजकल मेज के कि कॉल ही नहीं उठ पा रहे हमारे, या बायर बढ़ाओ, सेलर तो बहुत आ गए. So all of that imbalance keeps starting after it takes roughly 1.5-2 months to develop a new location, to gain that trust. और फिर वो लोग भी काफी क्रॉस वेरीफाई करते हैं क्योंकि टिकट साइज बहुत ज्यादा है. It's make or break kind of deal for that seller.
Interesting. But Nikhil, when you're talking about that, right? When you're talking about, and I understand where you're coming from, right? Typically, what happens is suppliers are quick adopters, right? Because they are sitting on inventory that they need to sort of dilute, right? And they want a quick realization, right? So sellers are typically in any environment, right? Any marketplace environment are the faster ones to adopt, right? And they're actually the ones who will put in more effort to make it a very transparent visibility. They'll put in all the data points that you required and so on and so forth, right? Buyers take a lot of time, right? And buyers need a lot of reassurance, right? How difficult was it? I mean, we've seen early phase of e-commerce, right? Urban audience, which was educated, right, needed a lot of discounting. They needed to be seeded in, right, to kind of buy, right?
Correct.
Have you been through the same curve, right, where you had to sort of say, do this kind of discounting, which of course, became part of your CAC and so on and so forth, right? But did you have to get that to that level where you had to seed in, the habit, right, of coming onto Bijak and, updating information, so on and so forth?
So I think over here the major thing which helped us was like coming up with a very separate value for buyers and sellers, right? If I talk about other e-commerce player, right, where you kind of go to buy your produce, buy daily coursework or maybe order a food, right? There is you kind of the platform delivers same value कि supplier का सामान बिक रहा है, buyer खरीद रहा है. हमारे केस में the value was very different. For supplier, it was you're able to liquidate your produce. You're able to discover various parties across India. It's a very simple statement. You're able to now you're able to sell maybe to 15-16 people. Now you have a pool of 1,000 people, right? At a click of button, you can sell to anyone sitting in Jharkhand. आप कभी खुद झारखंड गए भी नहीं हो और आप झारखंड में अपना सामान बेच रहे हो. That is the biggest USP for that. For buyers, it was कि existing business आप हमारे थ्रू करते हो. तो आपका प्रोफाइल बिल्ड होता है, जिसके बेसिस पे जब आपके पास बिजनेस नहीं होता हम लाके देते हैं, राइट? अभी 4 महीने आपका अच्छा बिजनेस है फॉर श्योर, क्योंकि हम जिस भी बायर को रीच आउट करते थे, राइट, हमको भी वी हैव टू डेवलप लाइक काइंड ऑफ वी हैव टू क्रिएट एन ऑर्डर, राइट, कि किस ऑर्डर में कहाँ कहाँ रीच आउट करना है एंड कैंपेन्स किस हिसाब से डिजाइन होंगे. सो मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम उनका उस टाइम पे तो पीक सीजन चल रहा होता था. पीक सीजन हमारे लिए बेस्ट उस टाइम पे ऑनबोर्डिंग इसलिए होती थी क्योंकि उस टाइम उनको कुछ वैल्यू नहीं चाहिए, उनको बस प्लेटफॉर्म पे शिफ्ट होना है, वैल्यू उनको बाद में डिलीवर होनी है. जब तक उनको वैल्यू डिलीवर होगी हमारे पास कुछ तो डेटा पॉइंट्स बिल्ड हो चुके होंगे, राइट, या बिल्ड होने वाले होंगे ऑलमोस्ट. सो बाय द टाइम दे विल बी ओवर विद देयर एग्जिस्टिंग सप्लाईज, वी विल बी एबल टू फिगर आउट हु आर द गुड बायर्स एंड बैड बायर्स, and then based on the other subject to knowledge, we will be able to give them or deliver them the value the moment they are like in shortage of supply. The other bigger factor with Bijak was the referral effect, right? The network effect. So every buyer which comes, right, it brings in 10 different sellers, right? क्योंकि आप seller को payment कर रहे हो, उसके सारे details add कर रहे हो. So seller by default platform पे आ जाता है. Same as with seller, right? So it's more of a network effect which helped us in cracking. The moment we see कि यार अभी buyers के ज्यादा seller, let's say कन्नौज की जगह अब आगरा से आने लग गए, या प्याज का जो अब ज्यादा सेलर है वो अलवर से इनके आने लग गए. सो विद इन 3 days वी कम टू नो कि यार अब अलवर में हमको टारगेट करना है सेलर्स को. अलवर जब जाते हैं तो हमको समझ आ जाता है कि वहां से ज्यादा सेलर तो अब बायर जो ढूंढ रहे हैं वो महाराष्ट्र के खोज रहे हैं, या फिर अनियन के बायर वो आसाम के खोज रहे हैं. सो नाउ वी रियलाइज कि नेक्स्ट लोकेशन शुड बी आसाम. So it's a very data driven, data coming from the real users, right?
But did you have to, Nikhil, did you have to incentivize them while you were kind of doing it, right? In some form. I understand where you're coming from, right? And I think that's a temporary aberration, right? It's not something which is going to exist for the longer time. And I completely understand, right? And that could be a modeling point, play as well, right?
So, Ashu, in starting there was an incentive, but incentive से honestly speaking चीजें क्रैक हो नहीं पा रही थी, right? मैं प्लेट अब मुझे अगर किसी को मान लो आप 1000 रुपए का सामान बेचना है ना, मुझे आपको शू बेचना है, मैं आपको 1000 रुपए में 50 रुपए डिस्काउंट दूंगा, आप शायद खुश हो जाओ. 100 रुपए दे दूंगा, राइट, 10%, तब तो कन्वर्ट हो गया. अब किसी को मुझे 5 लाख का मिनिमम ट्रक बेचना है, राइट? अभी अनियन के प्राइसेस जब लास्ट जनवरी में थे तब एक ट्रक 60 लाख का आता था. तो 60 लाख रुपए पे कितना डिस्काउंट बर्न कर पाऊंगा? आई ऑल्सो एज अ कंपनी हैव सर्टेन लिमिटेशंस, राइट? सो मोस्ट ऑफ द B2B स्टार्टअप्स, I think things cannot be cracked only through discounting, right? Starting में हमने discounting दी थी, अभी भी नए नए entrants को we do offer discounting, but वो वैसी चीज है कि even if we mention that, right, वो तुरंत ही डिस्काउंट कर देता है. हम 1000 रुपए डिस्काउंट देते हैं, तो गाय वुड से कि मैं 5 लाख रुपए के लिए तुम पे 1000 रुपए के लिए थोड़ी ना ट्रस्ट करूंगा. तो उसके काफी टाइम तो नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट भी आने लग गए थे. यार तुम स्कैम तो नहीं कर रहे हो. इन द वेरी स्टार्टिंग जब जीरो मीडिया कवरेज था, यू गो टू समवन एंड से कि यार तुमको डिस्काउंट मिलेगा प्लेटफॉर्म पे, एंड आई वुड से कि भाई पैसा बनाओगे तुम, वो तो समझ आता है कि यू विल चार्ज समथिंग, बिकॉज़ दीस आर द ऑडियंस हु आर नॉट एक्सपोज्ड टू द ग्लोबल प्रोडक्ट्स, राइट? उन बाकी स्टार्टअप कल्चर उनको नहीं पता है, बाकी कोई और ऐप उन्होंने यूज
नहीं. I know what you mean. Yeah, right.
So, उनको वैसा लगेगा कि यार क्या है, मतलब बिल्कुल ट्रस्ट नहीं करना है इस पे. तो वो फिर थोड़े टाइम के लिए हमको हार्ड स्टॉप ही लगाना पड़ गया था.
Interesting.
बहुत टाइम तक देखोगे वो बर्न 0 आ रहा है. इवन अदर पीपल आर स्टेक होल्डर्स वर आस्किंग कि यार तुम पैसे तुम्हारे बर्न 0 क्यों है, कुछ तो दो. अब डायनेमिक्स बैठ ही नहीं पाती.
I understand where you're coming from. I understand, and I think you're absolutely right. I think audience at that level deal in a completely different way, right? In a very unpredictable way, and and you start to incentivize them, and they're like, why? I mean, there's nothing happening, and I completely understand where you're coming from, right? And even if you do, that's not something which you can carry for a very long time, right? I think the transaction volumes are much larger, and I understand where you're coming from, Nikhil. Nikhil, in a business like this, right? You're essentially operating in a trust ecosystem, right? Or you're trying to essentially shift what exists, right? A trust ecosystem that exists onto your platform, right? And you're saying that this is going to be the new platform of trust, right? Where it's going to be rating, ranking, quality assurance, so on and so forth, right? It's a very difficult path, right? It's a path where a small incidents can actually throw your reputation completely off, right? Have there been instances where delinquencies have happened, where say wrong trade happened, wrong commitments happened, right? And essentially it happened on your platform, and while of course you were not responsible, but there was a rub off on the platform, right? Saying that this happened on this particular platform, right?
Yes.
How have you tried to tackle that? And in an environment like the one you operate in, it's very easy. It spreads like wildfire, right? And you can lose your credibility in a matter of just about 2 days, right? So has that happened with you?
Ashu, I think again I like to break this question in two parts. The The first one is, of course, reputation matters a lot, especially in field like this, because it's a very close knit community, you realize. So,
Yes,
so
please.
reputation matters a lot because it's a very close knit community, right? A small community, people know each other, the buyers and sellers, and all of this. I still remember there were two different cases. In the first case, the case which I mentioned to you, right? The seller
Right.
supplied to a buyer outside platform unknowingly, and the point of contact for that seller, right, our own employee, he did not guided the seller properly,
Okay.
बिलीविंग कि सेलर को तो ये तो पता ही होगा, राइट, ये तो
Right.
बेसिक पता होगा कि आपको बायर प्लेटफॉर्म से मिलता है तो ट्रेड प्लेटफॉर्म पे ही करना चाहिए, राइट. बट आवर एम्प्लॉय टुक दैट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी कि हाँ मेरे सजेशन पे किया था इन्होंने ट्रेड, बट इट वाजंट डन ऑन द प्लेटफॉर्म, राइट, एंड इट वाज ऑन आवर ओन बायर. नाउ
Right.
व्हेन द ट्रेड अकर्ड देयर वाज अ प्राइस क्रैश, राइट. Price crash के अलावा the quality of produce was not very good, right? So again, both of these things could have been taken care of. It was if it was through platform, right? अगर platform के through होता, so there is a team which keeps tracking. Team को दिखता है यार 7 दिन तक इस trade का कुछ भी नहीं हुआ, या जिस दिन dispatch हुआ उसके 3 दिन बीत चुके हैं, मतलब ये ट्रक तो पहुंच चुका होगा, अभी हमको पता नहीं चला है फाइनल की पहुंचा है, which means there is some issue. They must have reached. इस केस में 7 दिन बीत गए, कुछ पता भी नहीं था. On day 8 the seller reached out to us stating everything, and then we reached out to buyer, and the buyer said कि मुझे तो इन्होंने सीधा भेजा था, आपके थ्रू तो कुछ था नहीं, इसमें ये इशू थे. बायर भी शिफ्ट नहीं हो पाया क्योंकि बायर खुद से तो अपने आप शिफ्ट नहीं करेगा. बीजेक होता तो शायद वो उस कमोडिटी के स्पेसिफिक बायर शिफ्ट करता. सो उस पूरे केस में आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि पूरा लॉस सेलर का कुछ एलिमिनेट हो पाता, लॉस कम फॉर श्योर हो जाता, राइट. उस कमोडिटी के स्पेसिफिक में कोई और बेस्ट बायर ढूंढ पाता, पास के लोकेशन में डाइवर्ट कर पाता, बायर पे प्रेशर डालता थोड़ा कि यार इस केस में थोड़ा कर लो, आपको बाकी के सारे ट्रक्स तो अच्छे आते हैं, इसमें थोड़ा हो गया, व्हाटएवर इट इज, राइट. बट इन दिस केस this did not occur, and the liability came on platform, where we as a platform took the liability. We released entire amount of seller, right, without deduction, right, and it was a big call for us, right. Again, it's a place where you choose in between business and your trust.
Absolutely.
Long term or short term. So we took entire hit on our platform. It was 8 lakh rupees of transaction, and then over time the buyer started paying us. It took us close to 6 months to recover full amount from buyer, right. Buyer ने पे कर दिया पूरा, थोड़ा बहुत जो लॉस था बायर और सेलर ने आपस में सेटल कर दिया, पर प्रिंसिपल अमाउंट का जो हिट था हमारे ऊपर आया, राइट. सो इन ऑल ऑफ द ट्रांजैक्शंस, राइट. अब ये वो एक एज केस था जहां पे आउट ऑफ द एसओपीज प्रोसीजर, राइट, वी गॉट इन्वॉल्वड एंड हेल्प द सेलर, क्योंकि वो सेलर के लिए ब्रेक और मेक वाला केस हो जाता है. यू हैव टू रियलाइज कि दिस अमाउंट, राइट, उसको उस समय इंटरेस्ट ही नहीं होता कि मुझे प्रॉफिट मिलेगा कि नहीं, राइट. दीज सेलर्स आर सो हम्बल, आई वुड से. वो पूछते भी नहीं है कि यार मेरे प्रॉफिट का क्या हुआ. द ओनली कंसर्न दे वुड बी हैविंग इज कि मेरा प्रिंसिपल मनी दे दो, मेरा बाकी बिजनेस तो कंटिन्यू हो, राइट. अब ये छोटे से गुडविल वैल्यू, आई सी दिस एज अ गुडविल वैल्यू, राइट. आई डोंट सी दिस एज अ फाइनेंशियल हेल्प टू अ सेलर, राइट. गुडविल वैल्यू थी, आप नहीं भी देते तो आपका कुछ नहीं जा रहा था सब पे. दिस काइंड ऑफ हेल्प मी इन अट्रैक्टिंग मोर देन 20 सेलर्स फ्रॉम सेम कोल्ड स्टोर, राइट. नेक्स्ट डे देयर वाज लाइक अ सीरीज ऑफ कॉल कि यार हमारा भी सामान आपके थ्रू बेचना है, राइट. एंड देन द बायर आल्सो सॉ अस, यार चलो इनके थ्रू सामान आया था, सेलर परेशान कर रहा था, इन्होंने खुद से मेरी हेल्प की आउट ऑफ द टर्न जाके, राइट. ये ऑर्डर तो एसेंशियली मेरा था भी नहीं. बायर आल्सो डेवलप्ड अ गुडविल वैल्यू. ये कपल ऑफ एज केसेस ऐसे होते हैं. एंड देन ऑफ कोर्स इसमें जो ज्यादा जिसका लॉस हुआ, एम्प्लॉय का लॉस हुआ, एसओपीज फॉलो नहीं हुए थे. बट अगेन इसमें आप दो चीजें कर सकते हो. आप what I've seen in past, right, you fire your employee or put a heavy kind of punishment on that guy, but these are all human errors, right. You have to learn कि product का flaw था, इसमें employee का flaw नहीं है, right. It's a product flaw, right. These things could be easily tackled through technology, right. So we kind of change the product flow जहाँ पे आपको pop-up आ जाता है कि आप अगर ट्रेड कर रहे हो प्लेटफॉर्म पे किसी से, तो प्लेटफॉर्म पे रजिस्टर कर दो. पेमेंट गारंटी जिस पे है उन्हीं पे हम लेते हैं, ऐसा नहीं कि बाकी लिस्टेड लोग पे भी लेते हैं. सो इट वाज अ प्रोडक्ट चेंज पे वी इनेबल्ड. इसमें थोड़ा बहुत एज अ फाउंडर और मे बी एज अ कंपनी यू हैव टू चेंज योर एसओपीज, राइट. कई बार आउट ऑफ द टर्न जाके भी लोगों को हेल्प करना पड़ता है. सो दिस वाज वन ऑफ द केस. ऐसे एक दो केस और आए हैं जहाँ पे हमने सेलर को बोला था कि सामान मत भेजो, स्टिल सेलर की इन्वेंटरी रेडी थी तो उसने बिना बताए हमको भेज दिया. हमारा मना करने का अलग रीजन था क्योंकि हमको डेटा के हिसाब से पता था कि ऑलरेडी ओवर सप्लाई है उस मार्केट में, तो ओवर सप्लाई में आपका जाएगा तो पक्का है कि आपको रियलाइज मार्जिन तो कम ही मिलने वाला है,
Right.
इनपुट लॉस
Right.
होगा। फिर वो जब ट्रक पहुंचा उसमें एक और फ्लॉ हो गया कि उस दिन वो मार्केट बंद था। अभी
Right.
आगरा से बैंगलोर जाने में इट वाज लाइक इन लास्ट जून, काफी
Right.
गर्मी रहती है उस टाइम पे।
Right.
तो वैसे ही माल खराब होते होते रहता, फिर उस दिन बंद है तो एक दिन पूरा ट्रक में बंद रहेगा, वो और बुरी हालत हो जाती है।
Right.
सो अब उस केस में हमको पता भी नहीं था, राइट? जब ट्रक
Right.
पहुंच गया तो ड्राइवर ने कॉल किया, क्योंकि ड्राइवर को लगा हमारे थ्रू ही आया। ड्राइवर इन्फॉर्म्ड अस एंड देन वी रीच्ड आउट टू सेलर एंड सेलर सेड कि नहीं, हमको तो लगा कि हम कर लेते हैं सर, क्योंकि
Right.
सामान रेडी था। एंड देन वी सजेस्टेड अ नियर बाय बायर टू हिम ट्रक, वहां से वहां डाइवर्ट कराया, खुद ट्रांसपोर्टर से हमने बात करके अरेंज कराया। सो दीज आर नॉट आवर ऑफरिंग आई वुड से, बट यू हैव टू एक्ट help your seller. You have to realize that they are your stakeholder or part of your business. In the end, if your customers are making profit, तभी आपको profit बनने वाला है longer term में। Short
Right.
term में कुछ भी data play हो, long term में if you are creating value, then only you'll be getting a business, right?
Right. Nikhil, but this is a very difficult environment to operate in, right? And and I understand where you're coming from, right?
Correct.
Where your job is to essentially bring in transparency, create that trust ecosystem, right?
Correct.
But traders are is a fairly smart lot, right? And not everybody is bad, right? I'm saying
Correct.
99% of them are correct, right? But there is a 1% which is always trying to kind of play a quick one, right? And then that becomes a difficult, right? One for any business, not just Bijak, but I think any business, right?
Correct.
And that puts a very undue pressure on, say the earnings and margins of the platform, right? In your case, how is the unit economics played out, right? So for all of these transactions, how is Bijak getting? What are your revenue sources, right? And are they equally slender because the markets that you're dealing with are slender, or is there a different mechanics to it?
So our current revenue mainly comes from discovery free and the working capital help they take from the platform, right? So for all the discoveries, we charge flat 1 to 5%, anything between 1 to 5% of GMV, and then we settle somewhat around 1.2 to 1.3 on an average for the existing transaction basis.
Right.
Now we make margin out of these transactions, but at the same time, you have to realize that to maximize your margin, right, overall earning of a platform, it's not something where you increase margin on a per transaction basis, but you have to increase the overall value of a platform, right?
Sure.
Be it expansion across commodity, across geography, across buyer, right? And at the same time, you need to stay conservative, right? So I'm talking about two different ages, right? It's kind of on a one end, on a one end, my target for sales team is to grow to a new location. On the second end, the target is to filter out bad people, right? And to recognize bad people or bad people over platform, right? That is something which cannot come through instinct, right? It needs to be data driven.
Right.
Me as a platform, every time you are, if I compare an individual and person to a company, right? As a individual, you have that leverage of saying no to someone without any explanation, right? Me as a platform, I cannot say no to anyone without explanation, right? I cannot stop someone from coming over platform without an thorough explanation, right? Just because someone else is saying कि यार वो आदमी अच्छा नहीं है, मैं मना तो नहीं कर सकता उसको. It needs to be data driven. So उसके लिए what we have done, of course, we create a credit rating. By the time that rating is getting developed, right, there are other mechanisms through which we keep verifying those things, right? So मुझे पता है कि अगर असम में मुझे किसी को onboard करना है, so Shankar Fruit from Kolkata is the guy जिसको मैं पक्का पूछने वाला हूँ. Shankar Fruit जो बोलता है वो कभी गलत नहीं होता, क्योंकि वो 150 साल से वहाँ काम कर रहा है. उसके ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स करते थे, पेरेंट्स करते थे. दिस गाय हैज बीन डूइंग फ्रॉम 10 years of age. अभी उसकी एज ऑलमोस्ट 45 है. एंड I have picked similar kind of people who were part of these ecosystem and they have started helping the platform, क्योंकि platform से उनकी बहुत ज्यादा help हुई है, तो ये goodwill value में करते हैं. These are not something which could be bought through money, right? ये लोग कभी आपके employee नहीं बनेंगे. उनका जो yearly turnover है बहुत सारे startups के multiple times है, right? So Shankar Fruit on an average does like 3-4 crore of transaction on a daily basis. Right. So उसको मैं employee की तरह तो कभी नहीं ला पाऊंगा. Right. Now I have to convince him, show him the longer term vision, convince him, make him a part of Bijak's success, right? And at the same time, help him financially by bringing more volume to his shop. सो जब भी मैं एक्स्ट्रा वॉल्यूम उसके शॉप पे लाता हूँ, मैं उसको बोलता हूँ कि आप ही की तरह बाकी जो अच्छे आड़ती हैं बाकी मंडियों में, उनकी भी हेल्प होगी अगर आप मुझे ये हेल्प कर दोगे कौन-कौन से मंडी में कौन अच्छा बुरा।
Right.
Now, in most of the cases, he would know person. कुछ cases में he won't know person. If he doesn't know, I have to move out to a person too who may know that guy, right?
Interesting.
So, and then you have to verify through 5, 6 different people. There is a proper SOP through which we keep a verification
Right.
of these buyers. Financial जो checks हैं वो तो in place रहते हैं आशु, but given the space we are operating in, right? केवल financial check से काम बनता नहीं. What if there is a person who pays on time? जब भी गाड़ी आती है पैसा देता है, zero default है. पर अगर मार्केट 500 का है तो ये 450 के हिसाब से पेमेंट करता है.
Right.
मुझे वो भी तो इंश्योर करना है कि सप्लायर को एटलीस्ट 500 नहीं मिले 490 तो मिल जाए. आई एम नॉट प्रॉमिसिंग कि बेस्ट प्राइस मिलेगा, पर एटलीस्ट फेयर प्राइस तो मिल जाए, उसको लॉस तो नहीं हो सेलर का. सो वो चीज चेक करने के लिए
And I think Nikhil, what you're doing is possibly trying to sort of build a method to the madness, right?
Correct.
I think exists none right now. I think the way trade happens, the way transaction happens, I think, I've been to mandis, right? I mean, I understand how price discovery happens, right? I think it's absolutely bizarre and difficult to even imagine how it happens, right? And I think it's a fairly complicated process. And I think having this kind of a system only helps the ecosystem to become more aware. I think practices improve, transparency. I think bad people and traders get weeded out in the process, right? Eventually they will get, so, and it's not something, it's existed for the longest time. I think you're a relatively new company, right? You can't change it overnight, and I think that's a wrong expectation to have, right? So I understand where you're coming from, right? And I think that needs to be seeded in, and I think a long-term job, right? Nikhil, we're towards the end of the conversation, right? 2020 has been a very unreal year, right? It's touched each one of us. But what it's also done is it's changed the behavior of how business happened, right? And specifically in your case, and you highlighted many, many things, right? But I want to particularly know, how did it fast track adoption, right? There was possibly a time when you were chasing adoption, right? Saying, guys, come onto our platform and, why don't you try and test and, incentivize, not incentivize. But it was a communication driven process, right? 2020 brought in a very different change, right? Where they had and people had no other options, stakeholders had no other option, but to come onto a digital platform, right? How has that changed it for you?
So, I mean, honestly speaking, Ashu, I never thought that this would occur so early, even in the starting, right? Although we never spoke this, but we all knew that this is something which is a long-term game, right? Even while having our initial discussion with investors or like aligning them with our own vision, it was very clear that this is something which is kind of changing an entire ecosystem, and it's going to take time because these people are not educated. मुझे सेम टाइम पे उसको एक ऐप पे अडॉप्ट कराना है, एंड उसी टाइम पे ये भी होगा कि उसके लिए शायद ये पहली ऐप है उसके लाइफ की. उसने व्हाट्सएप या यूट्यूब के अलावा कभी और यूज नहीं किया.
टिकटॉक करा उसने,
उन्होंने. सो टिकटॉक भी बहुत कम लोग यूज करते थे. ऑल ऑफ दीस लाइक people of 55-60 years old, right? YouTube and WhatsApp was the main app they used to use. Now, so first thing I would say, like even आउटसाइड इकोसिस्टम तो फिर भी ठीक था, विद इन इकोसिस्टम भी इतनी जल्दी रिमोट जा पाना, राइट? यू अंडरस्टैंड, एक नई कंपनी है जिसने ऑलमोस्ट पिछले 1 साल पहले ही रिक्रूटमेंट स्टार्ट किया. ऑलमोस्ट हमारी मोस्ट ऑफ 80% ऑफ आवर पीपल वर नॉट इवन 6 months old in the company when we have to go remote, right? And full remote. और फुल रिमोट भी वैसा है कि हमारे केस में पीपल आर फ्रॉम वेरी इंटीरियर लोकेशंस एज वेल. हम हायरिंग भी करते हैं ऑप्स में, तो फिर कोई झारखंड का है, कुछ लोग की ऑन जॉब ट्रेनिंग कभी हो ही नहीं पाई, राइट? एंड मोस्ट ऑफ पीपल दे वर नॉट फ्रॉम एग्री बैकग्राउंड, राइट? वी हैव पीपल अक्रॉस डोमेन, अक्रॉस इंडस्ट्री, राइट? सो उनको कई बार ऑन जॉब ट्रेनिंग रिमोटली देनी है. एंड एट द सेम टाइम विद इन कंपनी भी काफी टेक प्रोडक्ट जो डेवलप हो रहा है, क्योंकि एक नया प्रोडक्ट जब भी डेवलप होता है नए, और ये वो लोग हैं जो बाकी डिफरेंट सेक्टर से हैं, सो इनके लिए सेक्टर भी नया है, राइट? एवरी टाइम इफ आई हैव टू मेक अ एडटेक प्रोडक्ट, एटलीस्ट आई विल बी एबल टू रिलेट समथिंग टू इट, राइट? मैंने खुद भी पढ़ाई की होगी, मेरे छोटे यंगर सिस्टर या ब्रदर पढ़ रहे होंगे. नाउ मंडीज आर समथिंग व्हिच नॉट एवरीवन कैन रिलेट टू, राइट? अगर आप नहीं गए हो तो काफी चीजें आपको नहीं पता होंगी, राइट? डायनेमिक्स नहीं पता होंगे.
Correct.
So these are the things which I think within company it took a bit time for us to digest it, but this was the best thing which happened to us, right? क्योंकि उसके बाद स्केल बहुत फास्ट हो गया. Within company जैसे ही रिमोटली हम काम कर पाए ना, शुरू के 15 दिन तो हमने सब कुछ स्टॉप कर दिया था, right? हमने इंटरनल प्रोसेसेस पहले फिक्स किए थे, and that was a time when we raised our series A as well, right? When the COVID started in April. So within company also things is for like 15 days, and then we went to full-fledged mode. uh,
Right.
Seller and buyer also, right, when they were not allowed, even mandis were closed at peak, right, तब
Right.
वो लोगों ने उनको रियलाइज हुआ कि यार अब तो मंडी बंद है, पर
Right.
कोई एक साइड बंद है, right? तो कई बार ऐसा होता था कि सेलर साइड बंद है, वाराणसी बंद है, लेट्स से, बट सब
Right.
बायर साइड ओपन है, या फिर बायर साइड बंद है,
Mhm.
सेलर साइड ओपन है। उस केस
Right.
में जो दूसरी साइड थी उसको रियलाइज हुआ यार मार्केट ये बंद है, तो मैं बाकी जगह तो बेच ही नहीं पा रहा हूँ।
Mhm.
फिर कैंपेन्स के थ्रू या फिर उनके फ्रेंड्स के थ्रू, सर्कल के थ्रू किसी ने रेफर किया, या बहुत पहले उन्होंने कभी यूज किया था,
Right.
दे रीच्ड आउट टू अस एंड काइंड ऑफ एक्सप्लोर्ड कि यार कैसे करते हैं, और फिर
Right.
छोटे वॉल्यूम से स्टार्ट किया कि ठीक है
Interesting.
हम एक छोटा कंसाइनमेंट करते हैं, लेट्स सी हाउ द एंटायर वैल्यू चेन लुक्स, राइट, हाउ
Interesting.
द एंटायर साइकिल लुक्स, कि मैं भेजता हूँ कितने दिन में पैसा आएगा, क्या प्रोसेस रहता है। एंड
Right.
देन दे रियलाइज बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें थी जिसमें उनको बहुत डिलाइटेड फील हुआ। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, द मोमेंट दे रिसीव अ पेमेंट, राइट, दे गेट अ व्हाट्सएप अपडेट, दिस वाज अ वेरी डिलाइटेड एक्सपीरियंस फॉर देम कि यार पैसा आता है तो व्हाट्सएप पे आ जाता है मैसेज।
Right.
पहले तो एसएमएस आता था, और वो तो रात तक कई बार आता ही नहीं था, नेटवर्क नहीं हो तो,
Mhm.
राइट। पर अभी तो उधर से वो पेमेंट जैसे ही करता है मेरे पास व्हाट्सएप मैसेज आ जाता है,
Right.
राइट। पेमेंट क्रेडिट होता है तो मेरे पास एक रिसीट बन के आ जाती है जिसमें
Right.
ऑर्डर लेवल पे मैपिंग होती है, किस ऑर्डर के लिए ये पेमेंट आया। मुझे पार्टी का नाम पता चल जाता है, पहले तो पैसा आ जाता था, अगर कोई सामने से बताया नहीं मुझे पता नहीं होता था कि इसने पैसा
Right.
भेजा है। सो ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, राइट, जो मुझे तो पता ही नहीं था कि यार मेरे प्लेटफॉर्म की ये वैल्यू है,
Mhm.
उन्होंने बताया कि राइट ये सारी चीजें हैं जो उनके लिए बहुत डिलाइटेड एक्सपीरियंस
Interesting.
है। एंड देन वी
Interesting.
स्टार्टेड वर्किंग ऑन इट कि यार इसको और बेटर कैसे बनाते हैं, अक्रॉस डिवाइसेस अडॉप्ट कैसे हो पाएगी ये चीज, कि कुछ डिवाइसेस
Interesting.
छोटे हैं या फिर इंटरनेट है। So all of these things, of course, COVID accelerated the process, I would say, and
Right.
then people were open to learn new things, experiment, take a risk, and most of them they were successful, right? और फिर
Right.
वहां से it kind of helped us in creating a playbook, right?
Right.
So फिर जब market थोड़ा open हुआ, lenient हुआ, so we went on full aggression mode कि
Right.
ठीक है अब तो पूरा कर देते हैं end to end,
Right.
right?
Interesting. Yeah, right. And I have had the opportunity of knowing you, if even before you raised your first round, and I think that's something which is always visible, right? I think that sense of responsibility was always visible, right? Between I think you, Nikhil, and I think each one of your team members.
Actually, I forgot your help, right? You helped us in correcting our initial days. The guy who
uh,
made our app, right? So.
Nikhil, what are the next 2 years like? My last question, right? What are the next 2 years like? What is the matrix that the Bijak team is changing and chasing, right? What are the next 2 years like?
So for next 2 years, right, Ashu, I mean, of all the way, right, the time has passed to enjoy that liberty of being a new organization, right?
Right,
Now we are no more considered a new organization.
right,
So honestly speaking, now the more focus is to fix up the internal processes, compliance issue,
right,
and scaling the current business, right? So there are multiple other projects going on, right? International opening, international market bitbank,
right.
which came from our supplier ends, right? The
Sure,
demand came, logistics being a very new source of revenue for us and a new business we
sure.
recently set up and started scaling across
Right,
India, right? So I think with a right set of people, which we already have, and
right,
of course there are a couple of people to join us, right? So with them coming in, we do see like we'll be able to crack majority of it. But for us, it's not just a business, right? It's more of a
right,
responsibility, as you mentioned, right?
right,
And since nobody is there in space who's closely competing or who is closely helping us, right? And at the same time, I forgot to mention, Ashu, like there were many other agri-tech entrepreneurs, right?
right.
Running separate companies, right? Who
Sure,
helped us a lot, right? So people, there are other agri-tech startup who have used Bijak to buy or sell platform. And
right,
at the same time, when you speak to them, right, you'll feel like you're speaking to your fellow
right.
partner in
I
company
can
or
imagine.
fellow employee,
Right,
right? So the most of these people, they have went out of their way to help me
right,
personally. सो कई बार ऐसा होता है कि एक दूसरी कंपीटिंग कंपनी है, जो हमारी बात होती है तो वो खुद से बता देता है कि यार राजस्थान से हमको ये सप्लाई करना है, कोलकाता में भी ऑलरेडी हैव दिस बायर,
right.
आप एक बार इससे मिल लो, वो अच्छा बायर है, तो आपकी कोलकाता लोकेशन सॉल्व हो जाएगी अनियन के
Interesting.
लिए। So all of these people, they have helped us a lot. I may miss upon a few people, but I see Bijak's journey as more of a ecosystem player where we create a ecosystem and open to collaborate with anyone to everyone. Market linkage being a very big problem for India,
Right,
$240 billion market, so a very big opportunity for everyone.
right.
For us, it comes as a responsibility of the first player to be in the market, and in most of the remote location we are present, right? So
Interesting.
we'll just try to keep or set a bar where all of these are sellers or are buyers, right? They are open to adopt to these technologies or new entrants coming in the market, right?
Right.
To remove that fear of technology from their mind.
Nikhil, how I wish I could go on, right? I think this is such an interesting conversation, right? And I think there's so much of good work that you're doing on the ground, right? And I think our markets need this, right? And especially at the bottom of the pyramid, right? I think farmer incomes need to be improved, right? And of course, this is a conversation which has many, it has a deeper manifestation, right? Because while of course you're trying to solve a problem for a certain set, but I think it is something which is going to go across the value chain, right? And I think that is a very uh, critical requirement, right? Given the kind of economy that we are, given the size that we are, and given the dependence that we have on agriculture, right? This is a transparency that needs to be brought in, fast tracked, enabled, right? And I think the intentions are very clear. I think with the way you're kind of dealing, the way you're kind of building this market, it's extremely overwhelming, right? The commitment that you have and the way you're kind of playing it is very heartening and heartwarming, right? Nikhil, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks, Ashu. Nice talking to you after so many months, I would say, and good to have. And of course, like I have been reading Asia Tech Journal, like listening a lot about you. I do go through your WhatsApp status. I mean, all the big people coming in. I hope
Thanks.
like this initiative would definitely help the future entrepreneurs,
I
even
hope
the
so
existing
too, and
entrepreneurs, right?
and we're working hard towards it, Nikhil. Thank
Yep,
you so much for the kind words. Thank you so much for the kind words, Nikhil. Look forward to catching up soon. Please stay safe, right? I wish everybody at Bijak all the very best, all of your co-founders, the entire team. I think you guys are rocking, right? Keep at it.
Thanks, Ashu. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikhil.